Welcome back to the Pet Health Unlocked podcast. I am Alex Pearson, and in studio again with Dr. Keith Weingardt. And before we start this episode, we wanted to actually talk a little bit about how Dr. Weingardt and I cross paths. It's a fun story. So back in, I'd say 2019, when we took over ThorneVet and Animal Health, one of the things that we were lacking at the time, I guess, it was a doctor that we could work with for multiple reasons. One of them that we're going to be getting into here shortly is formulations. But another that we could count on for not just advice for customers, but advice for ourselves. So as we were starting ThorneVet and really taking off, I was wearing a lot of hats at the time. As I was doing a lot. I was doing customer service. I was doing sales. I mean, you name it. We've grown a lot in 5 years. But during that time, I get a call. One of the things that we were doing was encapsulated products in capsule form. And when we took ThorneVet over, one of the things we decided to do was to change to chews. And when we changed to chews, we had the idea, we certainly wanted to have a powder version, but we weren't sure about it. And then Dr. Weingardt's wife, Beth, who is awesome, much better half than you, but she calls and I answer and she goes, "Where are the biocardio?" And that's the heart health. It used to be called biocardio. "Where are the capsules?" And I said, "Well, we are discontinuing the capsules and all we have are the chews." And Dr. Weingardt's wife, Beth, says, "Well, we don't want the chews. We want the capsules." And I said, "Man, well, we don't have them. And what's wrong with the chews?" Long story short, there wasn't anything wrong with the chews, but they were not as holistic as we would have wanted them. And we've since, of course, adjusted them and made them what they are today. But when Beth and I were talking, she was really one of the first people that was at the forefront of us making powder versions for those dogs that might not like the chews, for example, cats especially. But that powder version is the most pure form of the product. You know, the inactive ingredients that we do use is very holistic and very good for your dogs. Don't get us wrong, but that's how we met. And it was Beth and she said, "Well, you guys need to change this." And within, what, doctor, probably 3 months, it had changed.
I think, yeah, what happened is it prompted a conversation between myself and you and Kim, the CEO of the company at the time. And I said, you know, I understand the chews. It's a move. The consumer really wants something that's easy to administer. But as a practitioner, I wanted something that didn't have the chew ingredients for some of my patients that I wanted to be really simple. But I also found the ease of administration and adjusting dosages with powder as an herbalist is much easier and more user-friendly as a practitioner. So much to ThorneVet's credit, they were very receptive to this conversation. And in fact, now I think almost every chew product we have now has a powder version.
Every single one.
That's the thing. And I think that's been true to this day now, that after, our conversations, Kim and Alex were like, "Well, we'd like you to come on board." And here I have been since. But much to the ThorneVet's credit, I think that they have been always open and receptive to the veterinarians, to customers, very open to hearing and impacting change when necessary to accommodate those requests. And I think that says a lot about the integrity of the company.
Absolutely. In fact, we were one of the founding members of the NASC, the National Animal Supplement Council. For those that do buy our products, you've seen the label on their company logo on our bottles. But one of the interesting things was when Dr. Keith did come on and we really did start trying to, get as much advice from him, is our chews are 100 times better, even in these last 5 years. We're always tweaking. We're always looking. In fact, that is what today's podcast is going to be about. It'll segue nicely into it. But we're just to kind of circle back, though, we are certainly glad that Beth called us that day.
Yes, me too.
And we are certainly glad that that you persuaded her to go, hey, find out where this BioCardio's at. And since then, like you said, we've got powder versions of every product except a couple, but the ones that we don't are on the human side.
And also more so, I think there's, for example, like ThorneVet. When we taste that as a powder, it's not as palatable. So it's easier to hide it in a chew than it would be to have a powder.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. So that brings us to today's topic. You know, we've got our multis, we've got our liver support, we've got, you know, canine cognitive, we've got mushroom medley. We've got a lot of products, but where do they come from? You know, like, where does the inspiration come from? Certainly not me. I am, I'm a business guy. I've always kind of been a sales guy, and I get a lot of questions, not just from customers, but from people that I just come across, even like in an elevator talk, or if I'm chilling at in a hotel, or just talking to somebody on a plane, and you get into, hey, what do you do for a living? And you tell them I'm in animal health. And here's the neat thing about Dr. Keith, and I hope you guys can get a bit of a taste of it today, is when he goes down these rabbit holes about trying to learn and figure out, it's all about the animals, but you can tell he absolutely loves every minute of it. So I kind of want to give them a glimpse behind the curtain about how we as a company formulate, the steps that it takes. It's not an easy thing. You know, sometimes when people see a product on the shelf, they just assume, oh, that's nice. But a lot of blood, sweat, and tears go into that. You know, a lot of work, a lot of thought. So what I'd like to have you kind of discuss is, Keith and I will be on the phone, and we'll be talking, all right, this coming year, let's think about getting maybe 3 or 4 products out, right? Like, let's think about digestive health. Let's think about longevity. Let's think about whatever our conversations might be. If you could, Keith, could you kind of give them just a tiny glimpse, and whatever you're comfortable with sharing, of when you have an idea, and you can use longevity as an example or whatever, how do those ideas pop into your brain? Like, where does the inception start? And then I'll kind of take it from once the inception, how does that begin? What's the process for you as a formulator?
It's an interesting question, and it's not something I've actually critically analyzed really, because it's just part of an organic process. Mm-hmm. And I think it has a lot of different inputs and threads that are being pulled on in that process. And I think fundamentally it comes from 26 years of clinical work as experience and seeing what the problems I'm seeing on a daily basis in the trenches, in the clinic, and what the need is. Because I've been studying supplements and supplement science for over 20 years. As long as I've been practicing as an integrative veterinarian, I've been looking at these things. So I see a lot of where the needs are, and I see where there's a lot of companies doing things, and I saw a lot of opportunity for ThorneVet to fill those holes and to fill that niche. And I think one of the things that I'm a real advocate for is really looking at the research behind these things. So I bring a very science-based, digging into the literature, trying to stay on the cutting edge. And that's where Longevity Complex was born from, is there is nobody doing this type of support for our pets in the longevity space. There's a lot of work being done in the human realm, but that whole experience prompted a deep several years research into putting together that formulation. But I think where the inspiration comes is from my experience as an herbalist and being in nature and appreciating the power of what the plants have to actually help us and our animals heal. And when I look at how I can use my allies in the plant realm to build a foundation of a formula that we can then look at, how can we support specific systems? So for example, I said, okay, we have the immune support formula. There were some changes that needed to happen to that to make it more balanced. So I subtracted some things and added some things to provide a more comprehensive, balanced support. I look at what other ways we can have ingredients that act as cofactors or are integral to the proper functioning of those individual systems of which the formulas are working on. So for example, I've always taken this philosophy of using system-specific nutrients, whether or not those are vitamins or minerals or antioxidants that are kind of like supporting that individual system, I then will utilize other ingredients like antioxidants to protect that. Because you always have to have detoxification and protection as part of your formula architecture. And then what I then try to do is take my allies in the plant realm and synergize that all together. So by combining all those things, everything's working together. And it takes a lot of like thought and trial and error in formulating to figure out what is the nuance of that. And the other thing, as an herbalist, we look at energies of those plants and what are they bringing from a thermal perspective? Is this a warming herb? Is this a cooling herb? Is this a safe herb to use longer term? And the other thing that's critically important in formula architecture is we are most focused on safety. That if I'm going to choose ingredients to support an animal, I'm going to make sure that those ingredients are going to be very safe, non-toxic, and that they're going to play well with each other so that everything's working together. And then the other thing I look at is we want purity, we want safety, and we want to have bioavailability. I don't want to have ingredients in these formulations that I wouldn't take in my own body or want to have in my pet. So we're going to use ingredients that are going to be tested for solvents. We're going to have no contamination, and we're going to put an eye towards bioavailability. And we've talked about this in a previous podcast. And what that means is we want ingredients that are going to be absorbed and utilized by the body in enough quantity to actually do what we're asking it to do. And we do that by sourcing ingredients that are going to be in the utmost in bioavailability, quality, and purity. And then sometimes, as we know, working together, I could have the greatest idea, but when we bring that to manufacturing, it could be like a $500 supplement that nobody could buy. So what we end up having to do is find some nuance of how we're sourcing ingredients. And because we're such an eye towards bioavailability, that allows us to use different quantities, maybe a lesser quantity of a particular ingredient, which is going to still provide the therapeutic effect, but we're also looking at how the synergism of all those ingredients working together allows us to use a modification of dosing that all comes together to really support the big picture.
Yeah, and see, I hope that Keith just explained that exceptionally well and in about 5 minutes, but that's a 4-month process. It could be.
Or years.
Yeah, there you go. It could be years. And so the point that we're trying to help all those understand is, and something that Keith brought up that I want everyone listening to understand as well, it's very difficult in the years that I've been in the animal health industry. You can be a great veterinarian, but have no idea how to formulate anything. You know, Keith is a double-edged sword. We're very lucky to have Keith on board, and I hope people can understand that, because it's one thing to understand what you're doing, but it's another thing to create. And to create it, to think about it, to understand it, and to see the pathways that this could work here. Because here's the thing too, it's trial and error, right? Well, you'd be like, "Ooh, this could work nicely," and then all of a sudden you're like, "Oh, no, that doesn't work nicely." You know what I mean? It takes patience. It takes a lot of education, a lot of understanding. And, you know, again, some of my favorite times are when Keith goes backpack it and comes back and goes, "Dude, I've got so many ideas, and here's 3 of them, and let's run this down." And to kind of expound on what Dr. Keith said, after he does that, and after he goes, "All right, we've got this, we take it to our sources. And while we source, we look for the best sourcing ingredients we possibly can. That is what we do. And that's when the business side comes in, right? We go, okay, well, we can't sell a supplement for $250 a bottle, even though we might want to, because it's maybe the most pure and effective, but no one's going to buy a $250 supplement. It's just not going to happen. But we certainly do look for the absolute best product possible, best ingredients possible, and it might be a little more pricey. We don't cut edges. We don't, you go out there, it can be the Wild West. You need to be careful with what you buy. You can go out there, and one of the things that Thorne made its reputation on 2 decades ago was not putting those fillers into stuff that every other company puts fillers in. If you grab the back of a bottle of most any product and you hand it to Dr. Weingardt, he within about 20 seconds, he's going to go, oh.
And I think it's an important point, because I think what happens with companies that are NASC certified, they're held to a higher standard, because any Joe Blow person could make a supplement company and sell it without any recourse.
Truly.
No, exactly. You could just,
and the FDA
and there's
dealing with.
nobody governing what's going into that supplement. So you could say, and you could have something that's got contamination, that could have toxins in there, could have adulterated herbs where it's not even the herb that you think it is, and people are selling that. So I think ThorneVet has held to our integrity. And I think that, ever since I've came on board, and just even the foundation of the company has always held that in the highest regard. And I think that's super important. And when we look at, ingredients or using powders, we're trying to use the least amount of anything outside of the active ingredients so that we can still have the product manufacture and be dispersed easily, but without having to add fillers just to make the product more expensive.
Sure. And or not only more expensive, a lot of people will just put those fillers in so they can sell twice as much and it does, and it doesn't help at all.
No.
And so once all of that happens, Dr. Keith comes down, we figure out a formulation, he figures out the dosing, then we test. And we've got multiple dogs.
We have a patient population that we have tested, and many of my clients are gracious enough to do that. My own dog Otis, I know March,
my dog.
We're the first line of defense to test these things for palatability, gastrointestinal, resonance, but also I can't say this enough, because I think it's something that guides me is I want whatever we're putting out there to be safe. So the other thing, and we had a great question from a customer the other day where they were asking about the fact that there were certain herbs or ingredients that had carryover in other formulas. Mm-hmm. And one of the things to remember with our line of products is that they're made to be used together. Mm. So we can actually have the dosing of the ingredients in the formulations allow for crossover with other formulas, so you're not going to run into toxicity. And in fact, you're going to probably have an enhancements of those two formulas working together. So when you ever have questions, this is really important to ask, and I want everybody to always feel comfortable, but I want you to know at the outset that this is something that we consider in how we develop and design and the structure and formulation and the architecture of these things has that at the underpinning of our consideration. So it's really important that that's what guides us. And then of course we want it to be effective, right? So we want to make sure we have bioavailable ingredients in a quantity in there that's going to work with the other ingredients to really get the job done.
Yeah, and one of the questions Dr. Keith answered for us in our shorts back in the day is how quick can I see a supplement work? Of course, if it's something that they're dealing with anxiety, it might not be something you see directly if they're an exceptionally anxious dog. But, I've seen people, no joke, with canine cognitive or even canine geriatrics, or where they start taking it and people within 5 days are like, man, my dog feels like he is a puppy again.
And sometimes it's like magic. So it's a very individualized response. So every animal is going to be different. And you could have something that works great for one pet and it doesn't really work that great for the other. So you have to trial and error. But the thing is that you can have a response where it's sometimes like magic.
Yeah.
Oh, and it's like within a day or two, they're having an improvement. Sometimes it takes 2 to 4 weeks. So the thing is, remembering our ABCs is being committed. Like this isn't like a quick fix. Many times, as long as they've taken to get ill is how long it may take them to get well.
Absolutely, if not longer sometimes, and I remember my mother-in-law, she had a dog named Brigham, good dog. He's passed now and he was awesome. But at the end of his life, we gave him canine cognitive and canine geriatrics. He had to have been about 14, 15. But when he would get in and out of a truck, he couldn't get in and out of a truck. And we gave him canine cognitive just for the mental, but we also gave him canine geriatrics. And talk about keys overlapping, talk about synergistic, the multivitamin and the cognitive. And not 3 days later, my mother-in-law called and goes, Brigham just jumped out of the car like he was 6 years old.
Aww.
And he was jumping in and out for the next few weeks and probably lived a good 6 months longer and enjoyed those last few months of his life a lot more than he would have. So to kind of wrap it up, and to Keith's point, I want you all to understand how much goes into this. When you grab a bottle or you're getting an auto ship from us, it's a lot that goes into us thinking about how we can help. And that's what we love to do the most. And to Keith's point, we want to make sure it works. We don't just want to hand you stuff. And so when we're done, we get the ingredients. It's sourced. It's tested upon arrival. It's tested halfway through. And then, to Keith's point as a sales guy, sometimes this can annoy my sales team. We send it out for an initial third-party testing after it's been bottled. And if it doesn't pass, and it's strict testing, when I say it doesn't pass, it's nothing crazy, right? It's not like E. coli. But if its specs isn't perfect, we will not sell it. And if it's on back order, we still won't sell it. And as a sales guy, you can imagine they get annoyed. They're like, man, what are we doing here? But that is how important we feel it is to put a product out that, one, we know is going to be effective, and two, it's always going to be safe. So,
So I think one of the ways I would describe that is that we not only put our minds and our intelligence and our expertise behind the product, we put our heart into it.
Absolutely.
And that's, I think, what sets us apart from others.
Absolutely, 100%. I couldn't have said it any better. And in that effort, it takes a lot of minds and a lot of people working together. Keith is the beginning of it, but there's a lot of in between. And we absolutely love it. It's one of our most favorite things to do. We're always looking to put more things out, so always be paying attention to that. Is there anything else you'd want to add before we wrap it up?
I think we kind of covered the bases. You got a little bit of a glimpse behind the curtain. Yeah. Like I said, is the inspiration I often take from nature, but I also find I'm very much a nerd, and I love geeking out over this stuff. I'm in so many different rabbit holes all the time.
100%.
And that's where we find some of our greatest inspiration.
Yeah, and like I said, we're very, very lucky to have the team we do, because there are a lot of medical doctors. And here's another thing that I'll say, and I know I'm pumping you up here, but you're the man, and I'm glad you're in the studio. But one of the things that you'll find about Keith, there are a lot of nerds out there, but a lot of them can't explain things the way that you can explain things. And it makes it a lot easier for us to understand and it not fly over our heads. Because it's one thing to understand the science, but it's another to be able to explain it. So we're very, very grateful to have you on our team for sure. So everybody, please reach out anytime. I mean, you can literally just say, hey, ask Dr. Keith this, and we'll forward the message to Dr. Keith.
Happy answer.
And his wife, Beth, who I mentioned earlier, is just as smart and awesome as Keith is. So if Keith doesn't answer fast enough, I just reach out to Beth and put her on it. So, but we're so grateful for our community. I really, truly believe that those out there that are buying ThorneVet for their animals know that that's what we're all about. We've always been about that, and we'll never change. We'll never change. That's one thing that no matter what the industry's doing, no matter what our competitors are doing, we are never going to sacrifice safety, efficacy, and being there for the animals. So please subscribe, like us, watch our shorts. We're going to actually be putting a lot more shorts out here soon. With a lot of Dr. Keith answers to customers that we're going to just do an individual series. So be sure to look for that. But again, we're so grateful for all of you guys, and pets are the best.
Pets are the best.